Heading into 2024, Donald Trump occupies a position of remarkable political resilience, shrugging off institutional gravity to remain the presumptive Republican nominee. But while his political momentum builds, a New York courtroom has been quietly dismantling the foundation of his wealth. In a sweeping civil judgment, the court found that Trump and his executives engaged in persistent fraud. They had vastly inflated the value of golf clubs and skyscrapers to secure favorable loans. The ruling stated plainly that the defense was operating in a fantasy world. So how does a figure whose corporate empire is facing dissolution over decades of fabricated valuations leverage that exact fiction into the highest office in the country? To understand his grip on modern politics, we have to look back at how he engineered this reality-distorting myth and kept it alive for half a century. The myth Donald Trump sold the public is famously outlined in The Art of the Deal, a self-made billionaire building a Manhattan empire starting with a single $1 million loan from his father. This New York Times investigation tells a different story. Trump received the equivalent of $413 million from his father. This wealth transfer was subsidized by dubious tax schemes. By age 3, he was earning a $200,000 salary. By 8, a millionaire. Instead of acknowledging his father's backing, Trump used the press to build an independent persona. He took journalists on tours of Brooklyn apartment complexes, properties entirely owned by his father, and boasted about them as his own successes. This origin story laid the groundwork for his entire career. He realized early on that a heavily marketed, media-enabled narrative could successfully overwrite financial reality. By the 1990s, he was applying this strategy to his own ventures, particularly his sprawling casino operations in Atlantic City. Behind the gilded facades, the operations were chaotic. Regulators slapped the Taj Mahal with a $10 million penalty for anti-money laundering violations. Saddled with massive, high-interest debt, his casinos and hotels went through multiple Chapter 11 bankruptcies. His empire nearly collapsed, but he survived because major banks calculated that his heavily promoted brand name was simply too big to fail. He began licensing his name to other developers, placing his brand on golf courses, bottled water, and steaks, and skyscrapers he didn't even build. Then came reality television. Starring in The Apprentice allowed him to beam a carefully curated image directly into millions of living rooms. The show edited out the bankruptcies and repackaged a volatile risk-taker as a decisive, hyper-competent executive. For over a decade, this television role insulated him from his real-world track record. The appearance of success had proven vastly more valuable and far more bulletproof than operational competence. Pivoting to politics in 2015, he brought his reality TV playbook. He dominated the news cycle, commanding attention with a disruptive campaign that secured the presidency. Once in office, his administration secured conservative victories, passing massive tax cuts and appointing over 200 federal judges, including 3 to the Supreme Court. Yet the daily governance of his administration mirrored the operational turbulence of his business years, characterized by open defiance of established institutional guardrails and long-standing ethics rules. He discarded decades of precedent by appointing immediate family members to senior White House roles. His daughter, Ivanka, worked on federal programs while concurrently managing international trademarks for her personal businesses. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, led shadow task forces relying on private sector contacts and unofficial communication channels that bypassed federal record-keeping laws. Meanwhile, he faced dozens of allegations of sexual misconduct and frequently directed hostile, escalating rhetoric toward the press and perceived political enemies. By treating government offices as extensions of a family business, the administration proved institutional rules were only as strong as the president's willingness to follow them. That collision reached its peak after the 2020 election. For the first time, his meticulously crafted narrative hit an immovable wall, an objective, mathematically verifiable defeat. Unable to accept the outcome, he fell back on his oldest tactic. He aggressively disseminated false claims of voter fraud, attempting to override the factual reality with a manufactured storyline. The January 6th Congressional Committee later detailed this effort as a multi-part conspiracy, concluding he unlawfully pressured state officials and the vice president to alter the certified electoral count. This rhetorical fiction had catastrophic physical consequences. Believing the election was stolen, thousands of his supporters violently stormed the U.S. Capitol to disrupt the transfer of power. The violence at the Capitol demonstrated that these rhetorical tactics could inflict tangible physical damage, moving beyond business negotiations and into the halls of government. Today, that bill has finally come due. He faces 4 separate criminal indictments, alongside the sweeping civil fraud judgments designed to dismantle the very businesses that made him famous. Yet despite this overwhelming legal peril, his political movement has only dug in deeper. Millions of voters remain fiercely committed to him, viewing the mounting evidence not as disqualifying facts, but as a political scam. The architecture of his entire life, both as a businessman and a politician, is currently under the strictest, most consequential scrutiny it has ever faced. Trump's legacy suggests that if a fiction is broadcast loudly and confidently enough, the distinction between fact and fabrication begins to dissolve, as long as enough people are willing to fight for the illusion.